now live. So, hi everybody, my name is Alea and I will be hosting this next panel, which is a panel devoted to these two lovely people coming from Taiwan and Australia. So they are international illustrators, and I'll let you guys introduce yourselves. But basically today we have a bunch of stuff that we want to talk about, including what it's like to be an illustrator and specifically how that process looks like in coming from your countries. So I know there's a lot of people that are interested in hearing, what's the process like, how might it differ from our own process here in Canada. So it's really good to have this opportunity with both of you. So thanks again.
That's okay.
I was thinking we could do an introduction then. So maybe your name, where you're from, and what your work looks like.
Who would like to go first?
Let's start with you, Talia.
No problem. So my name is Talia. I live in Australia, on the east coast of Australia. It's nice in the morning here, 8 a.m. And I've been illustrating professionally now for probably the past 5 years or so. But I've been drawing since I was very, very small, as I'm sure most people know the feeling of.
Excellent.
And yes, I'm Han Yu. I lived in Taiwan, in the north area of Taiwan, and I've been illustrating since I was a kid, just as Talia does. And I have an MFA degree in mass illustration from New York City. And hopefully today I can share some experience of myself to you guys.
I'm excited. I want to learn from you too. Lots of knowledge here.
So that's excellent. Yeah, I'm over the moon that you guys are both here, just to hear your different perspectives from where you're from and how you got started. So I actually thought that would be a good place to start here for questioning, or not questioning, but just to ask you guys how you did get started and what it took. Was there a specific pathway? Because I know the pathways are different for each person. But how did you get into this business and in this field?
That is a very good question. For me, it was almost sudden and not at the same time. So I went through high school. So in Australia, we do 6 years of primary school is what it's called, and then 6 years of high school. And I was halfway through high school in grade 10, and I wanted to be a vet. That was my go-to. I love maths, I love science, and I was like, I'll be a vet. And then I realized I actually would have to hurt animals, and I didn't want to do that. And I love drawing, and a lot of my friends were like, oh, you like drawing that anime stuff? Why don't you just take art? I was like, okay, sure, I'll do that. And I loved it, and I fell more in love with it. I did a bachelor in fine art at one of my universities, and which was nice. It definitely didn't. It was very fine art oriented, so it was not at all illustrator style, but it really helped me get a better grasp of a lot more like color theory and life drawing and those sorts of great fundamentals that I think everyone should at least know about. And then I pretty much had to keep just working retail, and then I had my first kid about 4 years ago, and that's what really, funnily enough, kickstarted my illustration career, because I had to finish my work and I became a stay-at-home mum, and I'm like, wow, I have so much time when this kid sleeps. I could just keep drawing. And I started actually applying for conventions when I was 6 months, when I had a 6-month-old baby, and I started doing conventions that first year of him being born, and it just totally took off from there, and it kind of fell into my lap almost. I wasn't planning for it to be a lot more of my career as it is now, back 5 years ago, but it definitely has just taken on a life of its own, and I'm really grateful for it. But yeah, it wasn't something I planned for at all really to begin with, but it was just something that progressed and evolved over time, most definitely.
Yeah, for me, I grew up with a family with all the arts, because my parents are all working related to art, so I was really familiar with art since I was a little kid, and I always loved to draw. And when I went to senior high school, I hadn't really thought about going to the art industry, but since I attended to the college where my major was related to like a kind of art and computer science combining together, and at that moment I started learning like digital arts, like Photoshop and other things like compositions and designs. And from that moment, I start to focus on doing arts more and more. And it's also the moment that I started to accept commissions from publications or game companies. So that's kind of like a start of myself to be an artist for doing freelance job. And after a few years of doing that, I started to feel like I have to change myself a little bit because I always kind of doing the same thing. So I tend to a school in the United States, and staying there is like a life changing to myself because I just contact all the different arts and different people in a different cultural base. So, and I always love to doing art. So it's like a life going through from Taiwan to United States and then back to Taiwan, and still keep doing art.
Wow. Well, it seems like you both have had some really cool experiences just getting to your point that you're at now, which is really refreshing to hear. I'm wondering, has your job or your time in the illustration field led to any other opportunities that you thought you'd never get if you weren't in that field? Like maybe if there's a top 2 or 3 opportunities that you've gotten, I would love to hear about it.
Yeah, so probably for me at least, the highlights so far of my career has been being able to, I've taught workshops for companies like Google and Pinterest and YouTube. That was probably like a huge highlight for me because I never thought I'd get to be drawing their CEOs and the CEOs would be getting to see my stuff. And I'm thinking people worth $500 million are seeing my stuff. That's terrifying. And the other highlight for me was being commissioned by Hasbro and working on some of their games. And I thought that was just a really it kind of validated for me my own career because I had these, big companies actually wanting my work. And I guess for someone who wasn't really sure of herself, I guess, to begin with, or was kind of happy just staying as a private commissioner. I was just happy even just people wanting to buy my stuff on a private level, I thought was amazing. But to have it on a commercial level meant even more to me. But yeah, that's probably my biggest ones. I haven't gone out too much past my house, unfortunately, but that's probably my bigger highlights for me, at least.
Yes, for me, it's more like having opportunities to teach people for having lectures and classes in like a college or a private panels, because I was growing up like a shy kid and hard to speak up for myself. But since I'm doing artwork and I start accumulate my works, I feel more confidence to face people and just sharing my knowledge and experiences. So that's the opportunities that I haven't thought about when I was a kid or when I started doing art. And then on the other hand, I really appreciate people trusting me to do artwork for them, because like they are putting their brand or like their trust to me. So that's the moment like feel like I am really doing something to return to this society.
Wow, those are beautiful goals, and they sound like very genuine to your hearts and like where you're coming from, which is really like nice to see. I am wondering though, because I've talked to many artists in my lifetime and so far, and lots of them being animators, and one of the things they always tell me is that the challenge to get to where they are when I do talk to them is pretty immense. So they go through like a big process to get to where they are. And so I would love to hear about that. Like, what were the challenges that you overcame? And is there one that like sticks out to you as being really difficult? Or did you find it to be like a pretty smooth process?
Would you like to go first with this one?
Yeah, sure. I feel like challenging is always being to satisfy the requirements from the clients, because all the clients have different aspects of how they want our work to be, and as a freelance illustrator, you have to deal with the different like demands, requirements all the time. And the challenge for me is to communicate with clients in the first place, like from the beginning, and to know what they want and what's the styles they want to have in the artwork. And it's always like very challenging because especially from the different countries, like from the United States or Japan or from other places, they have the different like descriptions or the different contracts, and you have to figure it out all the time. So for me, the most challenging thing is not about art itself, but the process of like documents and contracts, and how to find a way to satisfy the customers.
You just described my nightmare. That is exactly. I literally had to sign a contract last night that I was reading through. I'm like, I need an accountant or a lawyer or something.
Yeah,
like, that's the hardest part, especially working. I mean, thankfully, I have a cousin in Japan who speaks Japanese fluently, so I just chuck any Japanese things his way. But with the US, definitely there's a lot of different tax contracts and those kind of things. I think, yeah, definitely probably the hardest part, funnily enough, about it being an artist isn't the art. It's a lot of the time discerning exactly what your client is wanting. Sometimes you have wonderful clients who will give you step by step, and sometimes they even draw something for you that you can base off, which is awesome. But sometimes they'll be like, I'll leave it up to your creative imagination. I was like, don't say that. That's too much. That's too open. So that's definitely one of the hardest parts, is just communicating. You have to have really good people skills. Otherwise, you need to learn really good people skills, unfortunately, because that's just part of, especially if it's just yourself and you're your whole brand, your whole business, you're your own marketing, you learn how to become a marketer, a tax person, you learn all these different things, which is wonderful, but it can be pretty jarring when you're not prepared for it, when you just go into art like, yeah, I just want to do art, I just want to be an artist and draw, and unless you have a really good support team, it can be really quite scary, I think, for a lot of illustrators. And I think some even get a bit scared away by it because they weren't expecting, if they start getting quite well known or quite big, you have to deal with publishers, you have to deal with editors, you have to deal with so many people, surprisingly enough, for a pretty reserved career. Like when you're an artist, you just feel like you're just dealing with yourself, but you have a lot of people in your circle you need to communicate to and make sure that you're being understanding, but you're not being taken advantage of. And it's just there's a lot of people skills you learn being an artist for yourself, I think. Yeah.
Yes, especially like to evaluate the price in the first place, because you are always afraid of lower yourself, and and sometimes it's hard. You are afraid of opening too high the price, and it will scare the customer out.
Yes. Yeah. That's the scariest part, especially when you get commissioned by someone you really like, you've been wanting to be commissioned for, but then you're like, it's got to be worth my time, but if I give them this price, are they just going to run away and I'll never hear from them again? It's like, it's a scary thing to be confident in your skills, but then to actually put that into the workplace is really terrifying as an artist. But I think once you have a bit of a reputation, I'm sure you can kind of justify those prices. I remember when I first started out, I was taking anything. I was like, $5, that's fine. Free, that's cool. But you learn to get more confident in your own skills, thankfully, slowly.
Yeah, well, speaking of that building process, Talia, I was on your Instagram many times over the past month, and it looks gorgeous, and like you have a really good fan base. And I'm wondering, like, what did that building process look like? Because you just mentioned you started from like commissioning really cheap prices. Was there like a ladder that you climbed, or like that you felt like you were climbing throughout the process?
Yeah, it was really strange. Because I never really thought of social media as a business tool. For me, it was just to make friends. I liked that people liked the same stuff as me, and I could just post my drawings and people could talk. But it first began when I won a contest from an artist who was really popular, and that just kind of blew it up. I think when I'm talking to students that I teach, or just other people who just generally ask me on Instagram, you know, how did you get followers? How do you do this? How do you do that? And at least for me, for Instagram, a lot of it was just being being a kind person, just being kind, trying to make friends with artists, not trying to assume that, like, oh, if you become my friend, you can then make me famous. I naturally became friends with a lot of really awesome artists that happened to have lots more followers than me, and I would join their contests, or I'd do prizes for them in their giveaways, and I do these things. Just networking is a huge part of being an artist. And I've noticed that virtually and in real life, you know, the more people you know, the more opportunities you're going to get. And that was pretty much the biggest thing for me on Instagram, is I just had a lot of opportunities, one after the other, where either I was involved in lots of events or lots of competitions, and people would just all of a sudden went to my page, and I was like, oh, okay, I think I got like 10,000 followers in like a day. I was like, okay. So it's interesting. It's hard because I know a lot of artists feel like if I don't have these amount of followers or these amount of likes, that it's very, it hurts their self-confidence. And I totally feel that. Even when you have a few followers, it can be quite scary because you think, oh, my followers like this, or you kind of start second guessing yourself a lot. And I think what I just tell people is just be your genuine self. You know, everyone has something to give to the world in their art, in their personality, whatever. Find what fulfills you and what you can give to the world, and people will just latch onto it regardless of what it is. You'll find your people. And you know, sometimes you got to step out of your comfort zone and do competitions, or, you know, do a live on Instagram, or just do things to interact with people. But if people feel like you're being genuine, not just a robot and putting stuff on there and then leaving and running away, I think that's what means a lot to people nowadays, especially with everything happening in the world. People want genuine contact, not just, here's my art, see ya, bye.
Right, yeah, those are all really good points, and especially like the networking. A lot of times it feels like artists kind of want to stay in their own bubble and maybe be more introverted in their art. But what I've noticed is that they really actually are great networkers, and they have just a lot of talent there too. So I have a question for Han Yuan too, that's more directed for you. Yeah. I traveled to Taiwan before, and I went to an artist con, and basically the lineup wrapped around the building twice. Like, there were so many people there, and given that like manga art has sort of risen from these Asian countries, I'm wondering, like, what is the art culture in Taiwan, and is it like, do you notice things in Taiwan and especially in manga art that are a little bit different from your time in the US?
Yes, the environment is totally different comparing to Taiwan and the United States, because Taiwan has a great influence by Japan in the past and by now. So we kind of grew up by reading Japanese manga. So we are really familiar with the manga style. So if you mentioned how to start doing art or manga in the first place, we always say like doing like a Attack on Titan or like something related to Japanese manga instead of like a superheroes kinds of stuff. So, and on the other hand, the facial expressions, like facial features, how to describe it is a little different comparing to Taiwan or Japan to United States, because in Taiwan or Japanese or in Japan, we tend to draw mangas characters in more cute or more adorable styles instead of being masculine or a lot of muscles. And on the other hand, for related to convention, because we have the lower price to publish our own books, like something like this kinds of book that I published for myself. So
pretty.
Yeah, thank you. So in Taiwan, if you are attending to a manga convention, we'd love to do our own books instead of doing like posters or postcards. So that's also affect how we think about doing things in convention as well, because we always think about doing book. So the schedule is totally different. So we have to spend a lot of time to think about how to fill all the like 32 pages or 16 pages in a book instead of doing one like really beautiful poster. And on the other, moreover, attending conventions in Taiwan is more like to know people, to know the creators in the same area, and to meet your fans or even to meet potential clients in that place. Yeah.
That's really cool.
That's interesting. I was quickly going to say, that's just so interesting because that's so different to Australia in conventions. I mean, it is really rare to find books. It is so hard to make books. I really notice when I see people's catalogs for conventions, especially with a lot of, Taiwanese and like those conventions, they have a lot of like art books. And I'm like, how are people making all these amazing art books? But that's so interesting that you said, you plan for that in mind. That's how you actually plan for conventions. Whereas in Australia, for all us Australian artists, we plan prints. Prints is all we do. Prints is what sells, and that's, we think one illustration at a time. If we can bust out 10 nice illustrations before a convention, that's amazing. But it's so interesting to think that, to know that that's how in other countries, that's how their mindset is for conventions. That's so cool. I wish it was like that. But yeah, I'd love to have so many more books of my stuff.
But that's really tired to manage to finish one book.
Yes, of course. I have like this tiny little book I did a couple years ago that I managed to do, and it was like so expensive just for like a few copies. I'm like, I'm not doing this again. Why would I do this again? But it's so cool knowing that it's such a nice, like it's such an integrated thing for artists in other countries. I hope it gets like that here in Australia.
It's funny, it makes sense because after that con, I had like a bag full of different books. So
I always get yeah.
I understand now. Anyway, there's a question for you both from the chat, from your audience here, and it says, I've seen both of your works and you guys constantly have new creations to show. How do you maintain your productivity as an illustrator?
If I knew the answer, probably lack of sleep. I mean, I'm a full-time mum during the day, and my work schedule is 8 p.m. till 2 a.m. That's when I will sit down at my desk and I'm like, okay, I'm working now. I don't know if I'm going to work on my own stuff or if if I obviously have deadlines, I need to work on deadlines, obviously. But that's a really good point. Another hard part about social media is this idea of constant content creation. And artists can't just be, if they don't post for like a couple of days, everyone's like, where have you gone? Why aren't you drawing? It's like, I am drawing. I just can't show you stuff because it's for other people. And it's really hard to have this, even if you just do a sketch. And that's what I think has gotten me through times when I've been busy with work art and I can't post social media art. What I'll do is I'll literally find the half an hour in my day to do a sketch that I think looks decent, or like polish up a drawing I had in my archives, and then I'll post that. And I think it's just something to keep people, know that I'm still alive and still care about my followers and I want them to see new stuff from me. But I also can't be spending hours and hours. The stuff you probably see on my feed recently, I will not take longer than an hour on, just because I don't have any more time to give to it. But yeah, I don't know about everyone else's experiences.
Yes, for me it's almost the same, because if you have the client works for clients, you cannot post them. So
NDAs.
Yes. So the other benefits for doing books for conventions is that you can do like illustrations and then post it on the social media, and then collect them to a book and publish them in a convention. So that's another one good thing for doing book in convention. But sometimes I need to, as the Talia said, I have to force myself to do something like a little doodles or thumbnails to post on the social media, so let people knowing I'm still alive. But sometimes it's really hard for me, because some doodles or sketches, you feel like it haven't finished yet, but you have to post it because you have been like 3 days or 4 days haven't posted anything. So that's another thing you have to like overcome yourself to don't be shy to post something in the middle, or trying to communicate with your audience and your fans or your friends on the social medias. And furthermore, to post like regularly like rough sketches and live works and rendering in the middle, like you can separate one illustration to like 3 or 4 processes to post. So you can plan it in advance to say, like, if I'm doing this illustration, I can use this illustration for like 4 weeks or 3 weeks to post individually. Yeah, that's another thing I learned during develop my social network.
Oh yeah, that's a great point. And I guess also a big part of it is just being very self-aware of where you are mentally. Like if it's really stressing you out to post too much, just don't do it. Like at the end of the day, it's your mental health and your own physical health that really makes a difference. I know when it's Inktober and all these other months where they draw every single day, I remember I'll do like 2 full weeks and I will literally be burnt out for a month. Like that'll take so much out of me. And I've realized, okay, my posting process is like 2 to 5 days, and I'll just make sure I keep somewhere in that. If I can't, I don't kill myself over it. But it's just staying aware that, like, okay, I need to kind of post something soon. I'll just have that in the back of my mind. But yeah.
Wow, you guys are really busy people, it sounds like. Yeah, I'm also wondering, like, is burnout a thing for you? Do you have to take breaks where you're just like off the internet and away from the style pens and all of that? Like, is there times that you step back?
Yeah, that's a tough question when your business is also your hobby. Because sometimes I'll do art literally to get away from art, and it's like, okay, this is my vent art, and then I can do work art. But no, definitely sometimes I'll just be so exhausted. And this last week, actually, I had a huge week with conventions and different other events this last week, and I was so burnt out. This week, I just was sick for like 3 days of just fatigue and just I couldn't get out of bed. I was like, okay, I've learnt if you don't give your body breaks, your body will force you to have a break. So it's just, yeah, burnout is real, physically, mentally, socially. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, same to me, especially sometimes kinds of frustration when you see people are doing really great art on the social media, and like you were sliding your cell phone and you see, wow, that's great art, but I'm still playing video games.
So, I'm still on Genshin.
Yeah, so that's moments you feel like you want to exile yourself from the internet, from social media, and probably for a day or 2. But after all, overall, you still have to pick yourself up and put yourself back to the internet and to face and start change your mindset to really appreciate others' works instead of being maybe frustrated, and yes, and take time to take a break, just like Talia said.
Well, that's a great point. I mean, definitely when it comes to, jealousy with other artists and seeing amazing things, I also have had to learn, there's only so much you can beat yourself up about not being 10 years more experienced than you were. It's like there's nothing you can do about it. All you can do is try and get better and use them as inspiration. And that's what I've learned to do. Is like I was like, wow, I really appreciate the time this person's put into this. Rather than be angry at them for being so good,
Yeah,
I'm going to use this as my inspiration out of spite. Out of spite and anger, I'm going to make myself better. Yeah.
Well, those are also that's like really good insight. I find I do have another question, and I'm also curious about this, like personally. How much of you would you say is required to make it in this industry? Like, and by that I mean, do you have to go into it 100% and sort of drop your plan Bs and have this really as your only plan, or is it good to have like another idea of what you might want to do instead? Like, how do you guys kind of go into this field with what sort of mindset?
I feel like you kind of have to have a daily job in the first place, because so many freelance illustrators are dying for wanting to have commissions, but it's really hard to have this in the first place. So I know many artists in the beginning, they all have the daily routine jobs, and then improving their arts and having commissions from others. And then once the money flow, you have another clients and have another jobs every month, and then you can start thinking quit your daily job and start focusing on the freelance job all the time. So that's another thing for having daily job related to art is more convenient in my opinion, because you have learn how to draw arts and knowing arts people in your job, and then having the commission afterwards. But it all depends on your company, because some companies couldn't allow you to have the commissions outside of your daily job. And on the other hand, doing as a freelance illustrator or freelance job for arts, you should learn more things outside of arts, like 3D modeling or animation, and maybe even editing music, because you never know what is your favorite parts of arts. And even though you are doing freelance job, you can also learn how to do different topics or different genres arts in your leisure time, because sometimes people say it's not you approach the client, it's clients approaching you. So you can providing different aspects of creating arts. Maybe you can have more potential clients in the future.
Yeah, being versatile is definitely a huge part of that. I think I was very lucky. I think it's hard for me to talk on this subject because I feel like I had it so simple. I mean, I have a husband who was working. I became a stay-at-home mum, and I had lots of support from family and friends. And I said, I would like to not go back to what I was doing, which was just retail, and I would like to pursue this. And I had 100% support from everyone. And so I know that alone is a huge blessing, because I know lots of people don't get that support from friends and family. But I think definitely the hard part, I think, is you need to go from being just art-minded to being business and art-minded. You need to be thinking, you can't just be drawing, I like this, so I'm going to draw it and stay like that. You need to be going, I understand, this is popular now, or maybe I need to enhance my style in lots of different ways and have lots of different things in my portfolio. It's just being, thinking, sometimes what sells and also just being an approachable person. I've really just found, if you have the skills, if you literally just have the skills and you build those, if you have a part-time job now, or if you have something and you're not confident getting rid of that, then don't. That's totally fine. But keep building your skills, and when you become good enough, people just come to you. Like, it's kind of scary, just people will come to you regardless. And you might say, hey, maybe this might go somewhere. When I first started, I had no, I would never have dropped my husband's work or anything. And now I'm making more than he is. And he's on a full-time job. And I'm just like, well, I didn't know that like 3-4 years down the track, I'd have that stability, and I would never have dropped work if I had it back then. But I think it's just keeping your mind open, because literally anything can happen. Tomorrow you might get a $10,000 contract. Who knows? I mean, it just happens.
Well, I guess I'm a good example of those people who just come to you.
Yes.
We have some more questions from the audience.
Yes.
So one of them is, what is your art style? Because some people aren't exactly familiar with that. I, for one, am part of that like viewer, I guess, categories. I'm not really familiar with what you guys consider as your art style.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to say, especially if you're like versatile in a lot of things. I did a lot of realism drawing in university, and I loved it as a foundation. Realized I hated doing it commercially, and so I went back to drawing anime, manga style. When people ask me what I draw, I will just say anime, because that's a very rounded term for a lot of people in Australia. I mean, Netflix has kind of blasted anime so much over lockdowns and such, so thankfully people are aware of the term at least. If I say manga, sometimes people are like, wait, what? What's that? I was like, oh, it's the anime stuff. Sometimes people say cartoons and I cringe. I'm like, okay, yeah, I guess. But yeah, it's usually what I classify my art style as.
Yeah, my style is more like manga style or anime style, combining with the academic oil painting skills with Eastern style and Western style. And my character is more realistic than the general anime, and I also love to combine vibrant colors and details to my artwork, especially something like Aboriginal culture, like detailing accessories and necklaces to my artwork. And I want my artwork to be like a decorative piece of art that you can put in your living room.
Great. So there's another question, and that is, are there any influences that inform your art style specifically?
That's a good question. It's hard to narrow it down. For me, my very first influence was Sailor Moon. I remember vividly being 5 years old, and my father bought me like a DVD of Sailor Moon that I would watch on TV, and every day I would trace the DVD cover every single day. And as a 5-year-old, for some reason in me, I have to draw like this. I don't know why. And that's definitely stayed an influence. But I think just being having a myriad of influences is always a help. Don't stick with one thing. I get a lot of people who ask me, how do I find my style? What is this style people keep talking about? And that literally only comes from being so well versed in almost everything. Like, put yourself into every single different art style, see what different art genres, what they look like, and then just think, oh, I kind of like that, I might try that in my art. And then after you've done that 100 or so times, you're like, I have something that not many other people or no one else has. And so I think just keeping influences as many as possible but yeah, Sailor Moon is always going to be the original for me.
For me, it's more like different stages of my life. When I was a kid, I always loved like a rock band or like Dragon Ball. So I imitate those manga lots of my sketchbooks. And when I grew up a little bit, when I was in senior high school, in that moment was like I watched lots of anime like Cowboy Bebop.
Oh, my husband loves that anime.
Yes, and
It's so good.
Gundam Seed, or like a lot of Gundam series. and lots of manga. And that's the moments I also admire the artists like Murata Renji. It's like he's the artist for the Last Exile and the Blue Submarine. And when I grew up a little bit, like right now, I love Frank Frazetta. When I was in the United States, I studied him a lot, and I also love like Kim Jong-ji and other artists like Alphonse Mucha or Musha.
I was gonna say, yeah, Mucha and that Art Nouveau style. Oh, so gorgeous. I love it. That really inspired me.
Yeah, I always learn new stuff from looking through their art book and finding the new details or new like things I could take it to using my art.
Yeah.
Okay, well, very interesting. I also have a question on behalf of the audience. That is like, how would you recommend getting started? Because it, like you said, it's not necessarily such an easy transition all the time, and you have to have like a certain amount of courage to just get into that art field. So if you had a recommendation to maybe like a teen who's in high school thinking about this, how would you guide them? And it's not an easy thing to answer.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about what I would tell myself, 10 years ago when I was 13. What would 13-year-old me want to hear? I think this sounds probably really corny, but just don't stop drawing. I think that's the biggest thing. People get so scared that their drawings don't look perfect to begin with, and that kind of scares them away from art. And I think if you could see some of my drawings even 3 years ago, I look back through my art and I cringe really badly, but that's amazing that your eyes and your brain, your creativity is progressing so quickly. So I think for those who want to get into it, don't be scared if you think, I have to do a uni course or I have to have some, particular study or people will want me. People will come to you almost purely based off your skill and just your presence as well. If you're being arrogant, people will very rarely want to work with you. But if you're being an open person and if you just keep being open-minded in your drawing, keep practicing, keep thinking, being critical. It's nice to draw pretty things all the time or things you like, but it's another thing to go back and critically look at them and like, okay, am I actually drawing this right? Is this actually how I want it to look? Because I would go into that for a while. I could see when my style or my talent kind of like plateau, and I was like, and that was the time where I thought I was amazing. I was like, this is so good, I never have to change. And then I would get a rude awakening. I'm like, I really need to get better. And it's always just that mindset of appreciating that you've come a long way or that you want to get better, so you don't feel like you have a really long way to go, but also knowing that there's a lot more to learn and there's always more to practice, and there's always, even if you feel like you've mastered something, then go to something else. If you can't draw backgrounds, now you got to draw backgrounds. It's just one of those never-ending learning possibilities.
Yes, I totally agree. Especially nowadays, you can learn a lot from the internet, like the YouTube art station and DeviantArts. A lot of different websites you can learn from, and also, and I learned a lot from those medias. And the second suggestion I would say is trying to build yourself like personal brand even from the beginning, like to have a good pen name instead of like me, like a BC and Y, it's a little hard to pronounce. But I used it for years and years. And yes, and start building your websites, or not website, like social media, like Facebook or Pixie from Japan, or DeviantArts, ArtStation, Instagram, Twitter, and even Weibo is from the China. And other things, if you're good at, or even you can recording your drawing process and upload it to YouTube or Instagram. It's really easily attract people to follow you. And the third part, I would say to find your role model that you want to be like him in the future as the artist. Like you can and research them how they get into this industry and what competitions, what jobs they took, and trying to doing researches as much as possible, and following their footsteps. And the fourth part is right now as an artist, you don't really have to be alive by taking commissions from clients. You can also earn a lot of money from like a Patreon or Gumroad. Although it is really hard to do it in the beginning. So my recommendation is you can do research about who are really popular on those like stores, media, and learn or to trying to understand why they are popular at there, and to know how they present their works on those platforms, and even in their Instagram or Facebook, and trying to think in their box, like how they manage to present their artwork. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it seems like you have like all this ready-made guidance, as if you've already told yourself this a lot.
You got to remind yourself a lot.
There is another question, and that is, do you have any weaknesses? Some artists love to gripe about anatomy and stuff. So that's...
Yes, for me, it's kind of like how do you figure out to put people in perspective? Yes, especially for multiple people in one platform or in one place, it's really hard to get it right. So every time before I do this kind of stuff, I always do a lot of doodles and thumbnails beforehand to make sure I'm doing right. However, I'm still mess it up multiple times. And on the other hand, it's like because my art is more colorful and vibrant, so sometimes really hard for me to decrease the saturation of my art. And it's kind of my art style, but sometimes the clients doesn't really want that really saturated. So I have to force myself to manage to make it in a balance, or to convince the clients that I could do some work like that. And furthermore, although I do a lot of gestures, sketches, but doing a perfect figure drawing in right anatomy is always really hard for me to achieve. Although I can do somehow to manage it look right, but there are always something I could improve myself depending on those particular arts. So that's why as an artist, I think everyone is always learning how to improve their figure drawing, maybe in their lifetime.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think perspective is a huge one that I think a lot of artists, me included, like to just kind of guess. And there's quite an art to doing good perspective drawings with lots of characters or with a background. Another thing for me, one of my biggest weaknesses, or something that I've had to really put a lot of effort into learning, is coloring. Funnily enough, I would never colored when I was younger. I refused to touch colors, in fact, when I was younger. And it wasn't until I was about 16 that I was like, maybe I should start coloring some stuff, eh? And so I almost had to start from the beginning at my late teens, and I was like, oh, color theory, mixing, like it did my head in. But like learning what colors go well, how to shade, not with black, but with complementary colors and those kind of fun plays you can work with. Color took me a long time to kind of get to where I was satisfied with. Yeah, it's my that in perspective.
Yeah, but funny enough, like coloring was my was my weakness as well in the past, but because I really don't know how to do like watercolors or acrylic colors. But when I started learning digital arts, it's really kind of different mindsets of putting colors on the canvas, putting on the digital arts. So that's an interesting thing.
Thumbnails are a lifesaver. Yeah, I think a lot of artists don't use thumbnails and drafts as much as we could. I always think I could be missing out on the perfect piece if I stop at only three little drafts, like tiny, but just trying to get composition and color right. Do as many as you possibly can, just to get your brain, as many opportunities to get it right as possible.
Yes.
I do have another question, and just so you know, we have like a carousel live post just of your artworks, both of yours, just on live stream right now, so they can still hear us, but now they're seeing your beautiful work. I thought this could be a cool question to sort of leave off on, because it's more of a like look towards the future note. And that is, what is the future of illustration? And like you guys mentioned, a lot of the skills are transferable to animation. Like I know people who started out with 2D drawings and then went to 2D animations and then ended up in like VFX. So I feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the skills are somewhat transferable in those fields. And it seems like stuff digitally is evolving really quickly too. So what would you say is, what does the future look like for people in the illustrators industry?
I think you got it really well when you said digital. That is really how everything is going. There is a huge appreciation for traditional art, but I think the ease and transferability of digital art at the moment is just going to get better, really, as time progresses. And that's something that took me a big learning curve, because I was a traditional artist. I used Copic markers, and I still use them, but I didn't get a tablet until I was a little bit further in, doing my art. And I realized, there are people younger than me that have been doing digital art longer than me, and so I have a big learning curve to catch up. And I think it's just, being open to that idea that these skills you will probably have to upgrade the more society and the more technology comes out, with different things. It's just being open to change, I think is going to be the biggest part for illustrators. Because I know some illustrators who get so set in how they've been doing it maybe for 10 or 20 years, and they just get left behind, unfortunately, because people, either like that's not what's in or that's not what's selling. And so it's just having to be, on top of what is happening and being welcome to going with it or trying it.
Yes, and I think learning is important. And for doing the traditional artwork, because I am also doing traditional artwork as well. So you have at least learning how to scan them into the computer and to adjust them to be able to present it digitally, and like adjust the brights and shadows, and doing like enhance the contrasts. And because right now lots of clients are living in different countries, so you have to deliver them to them digitally is easier. And on the other hand, I think the future for Illustrator, especially for digital arts, I think it's hard to say, because right now it's really like a scary time and a very hopeful time in the same time, because right now lots of different opportunities appearing every day, and there are like a NFT for selling your arts.
Yeah,
it's always like a new stuff coming up. So just like as Leah says, like open mind and learning, trying to observe everything, and I don't know, maybe I should say to, because there are lots of artists around the world. So right now you are more like competing with all the artists around the world. So maybe you should try to focus on one particular points that you're really good at. Like if you're drawing background, just trying to do it as best as possible. Or if you're doing like a portrait or gesture drawings, just trying to make it as good as possible as your weapon. So if your people looking for like particular genre or topics, they will think about you in the first place. Yes, but not limit yourself very early, or not limit yourself just for one or two, maybe 3 or 4, and trying to combine them together. Like you're really good at figure drawings and background drawings, so you can draw beautiful backgrounds and very interesting gesture drawings, and trying to put story inside it, and combine your weapons with weapons and make this all stronger, and then become your brand to promote yourself. Yeah, that's I think you should do as an illustrator in the future.
Yeah, I think putting emotion into art is going to be probably the biggest thing, like going forward. Art has become such a mass consumable thing at the moment. You know, people just take it in. You know, you need to think, you know, what's going to make someone stop and think about what I've taken 10 hours to draw? Is it just because it looks pretty, or maybe they might feel something? You know, find that what hooks you, and if it hooks you, you know, 9 times out of 10, it's going to hook other people. It's just the hard part is, you know, finding that for you, really. So I guess explore as much as you can. What makes you want to draw in the morning?
Wow, those are really just beautiful answers, and I really enjoyed listening to both of you, especially like how you said, Talia, having emotion in your art, because I really agree on that point. Like you can find art all around, but it's really the stuff that speaks to you on a personal level that like draws people in further. So I really like that point there.
Thank you.
So that has brought us to the end of our panel today. Do either of you want to plug your Instagrams, or I don't know how much we can help you out, but quickly before we end?
Yeah, super quickly. So I'm found as Orbital Swan on everything: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. That's been my handle since I was like 13, so you can find me there.
And you can find me from BCNY or BCNY Arts from social media like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter.
Excellent. And I just want to say, like, thank you from the bottom of my heart for both of you. It was literally such a privilege to have you here, and our whole team, I can promise you, was really looking forward to your presence here today. So, and another thing is, you guys did not have to agree to this, but you made time in your busy schedules to help us out and do this wonderful event, and you made it so great. So I really have to say thank you for being so selfless and just waking up so early for us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us. I've loved it. It's wonderful to start the morning being able to talk art. It's a great way to start the day.
Yeah, and thank you for having me as well. And I really love to meet new people, new friends, and sharing my knowledge of art.
Okay. Well, just for everybody watching, we will have all of their information linked on our social media, so you can check them out that way. And thanks for tuning in, everybody. That's the end of the channel. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.